This week, we will be examining how goal setting can support us in becoming self-regulated. In this slide, an advanced organizer will be presented that will be following through today's lecture. You see here that although we're going to talk about goal setting, we first have to talk about identity and values. Our identity and values are inextricable. Values define our identity, and our identity shapes our values. From our values, our goals are derived. Why in this order? Identity, then values, then goals. The foundation of everything is our identity, followed by our values, which should always precede our goals. If for some reason we have goals or we're achieving goals that are not aligned with our values, we may run the risk of achieving goals that are not important to us. Based on our goals, we design an action plan which leads to the outcomes that we desire. Thinking about our own lives and imagining the development of our identity, values, and goals, we can also imagine asking ourselves these questions. Who am I? Who do I see myself being in the future? What do I value? What is important to me? What am I passionate about? What do I want to accomplish as a result of these passions or interests? How am I going to get there? What actions do I need to take on a regular basis in order to accomplish my goals? And at some point, we stop and ask ourselves, did I make it? Did I accomplish what I set out to do? We will begin this lecture by taking a close look at how our academic and professional identity may form. What is the answer to the question, who am I? How do we choose what we want to study or what career we want to pursue, especially when this decision will affect us for decades to come? There are many theories about how our identity develops, but today we will examine Marcia's identity formation. Marcia's identity formation can be applied to many different types of identity development, such as religious beliefs, political ideology, gender and ethnic identity development, or even our attitudes toward current topics like same-sex marriage. In this lecture, we're going to apply Marcia's identity formation to our occupational decision-making. Marcia looked specifically at identity development and the crisis that takes place in order for this development to occur. According to Marcia, the criteria for attainment of a mature academic or professional identity are based on two factors, crisis and commitment. When we are in crisis, we are actively choosing among alternative values and beliefs, and this may impact the choices that we make in our life, such as our major or our occupation. We can either be in or have gone through crisis, or we could have never gone through crisis, never exploring the alternative values and beliefs. Marcia states that we are committed when we are expressing a strong personal investment in a belief or value. This strong personal investment can be the choice of a major, the classes that we're taking, or the choice of an occupation. Based on these criteria, Marcia distinguishes 4 different patterns and common issues. At each status, the crisis has either occurred or not, and the commitment has been made or not. Let's first take a look at what happens when neither has occurred. When a student has not gone through crisis, is currently not in crisis, nor have they committed to an academic or professional choice, the student is said to be diffused or in diffusion. An example of this may be a freshman who is undeclared and who is not consciously seeking a major, nor are they questioning what career they're going to have in the future. For students in their early undergraduate career, such as freshmen or maybe even first semester sophomores, it's perfectly normal to be diffused. But for students who are juniors or seniors or coming to the end of their sophomore year, this is a time when there definitely needs to be a commitment to their major and to their future occupation. Some students have already made or will make a commitment to a career or academic major without going through crisis. A student who is foreclosed has already committed to their occupational career or academic major, but these may have been chosen by another person such as their parent, rather than themselves. In foreclosure, there is no evidence of a crisis, no exploration of personal values, interests, or beliefs. A student who is foreclosed may say something along the lines of, "My dad has a thriving dental practice, and my parents want me to take over his practice. I am a pre-dental major." Oftentimes, students who are foreclosed experience pressure from others to choose an academic career that may not be aligned with their own personal values or beliefs. A student who is in moratorium is currently struggling with what they would like to major in or what occupation they want to choose for the future. They are in an identity crisis and actively trying to answer the question, "Who am I?" Students who are experiencing moratorium may have previously been diffused or foreclosed, meaning they may have had no prior commitment, or they may have previously committed to an occupation but are now questioning that decision and starting to explore other options. If our pre-dental major from the previous slide were in moratorium, she may say something along the lines of, "My parents want me to take over my dad's dental practice, but I'm not really interested in dentistry. I've always been more interested in writing and literature, and am thinking about changing my major." This student may be highly anxious about making a commitment, changing majors, or talking to her parents about her potential plans. Students who are achieved may have previously been diffused or foreclosed, but in order for them to be achieved, they must go through moratorium. This period of crisis and questioning allows the student to explore their values, beliefs, and passion, and ultimately commit to goals that are aligned with their identity and values. Although moratorium can create a state of anxiety and not be pleasant, it's the only way for students to arrive at an achieved identity formation. When considering these 4 different patterns in Marcia's identity formation, it's also important to note that there are external factors that affect whether a student reaches an achieved identity development. Organizational membership on campus, the degree of activity in organizations, and leadership activity has been shown to be a strong factor in students becoming achieved. So the message here is that if you want to attain an achieved identity formation when it comes to your academic and professional goals, the key is to get involved. Next, we will take a look at our values and value orientation. Our values help to explain why we do the things we do. Think about the classes that you're taking this semester. What are the reasons you chose these classes? When we think about the reasons why we do things in an academic setting, there are 3 value orientations that can explain why. The first is intrinsic value. This is the enjoyment that we get from an activity. Is there a class or classes that you were excited to take this semester? You dove into the subject matter. You were excited to converse with the professor or your classmates. You think about this class when you're not in class. You're excited to learn more about the content and even have conversations about it with people who aren't even in the class with you. When we have intrinsic value for tasks, we get enjoyment. We have personal interest in doing them. Intrinsic value causes us to be more engaged in the task, to persist longer, to be intrinsically motivated. We don't need any external control or reward in order to partake in this task. Think about the kinds of things you do purely for intrinsic value. These are things you may be passionate about. It may be the subject that you're studying at USC, an extracurricular activity such as playing an athletic sport or playing an instrument, being in the band. It could also be a hobby such as painting or reading books. The next value orientation is attainment value. When we engage in a task that we have attainment value for, this means that this task is important for us. It's important for our self-concept to do well. Think about yourself as a student, as a son or a daughter. Is it important to you as a student to give your best effort in a class? Maybe you're taking a class this semester that you're not interested in. There's no or very little intrinsic value for you, but it's important for your self-concept that you give your best effort in the class because you see yourself as a good student. The third value orientation is extrinsic value. When something has a utility value or is useful to us, it's said to have an extrinsic value. There may be a class this semester that you would rather have not taken, but you needed it in order to graduate, either for your major or for your general education units. When we have extrinsic value for our task, we are said to have extrinsic motivation. This means that your motivation to attain your goal comes from a source outside of yourself. This could be things like grades or money or pleasing others. It's important to note that we have different value orientations for different tasks. It's also important to realize that these values are not mutually exclusive. You can have different values for different tasks, but you can ultimately have all three of them for the same task. For example, maybe you're taking a course for your major this semester. Hopefully, the subject matter that you're focusing on in your college career is something that you enjoy learning about, so this course may have intrinsic value for you. Maybe it's also important for you to give your best in the course, not only because you enjoy it, but because you view yourself as a hard worker, and you give your best to everything you do, especially school. Lastly, if this is a course you have to take for your major, then it is useful for you. It's one of the requirements that you need to fulfill in order to graduate with a degree. Looking at these three values, which one of these do you think are most effective in motivating you? We put them in this order for a reason. The gold standard of value is, of course, intrinsic value. When we enjoy something, when we're passionate about something, oftentimes, even if it's difficult for us, we'll push through and pursue our goal even in the face of extreme obstacles. Attainment value is also very important for us because it is a reflection of our self-concept. While extrinsic value can be useful, it is the weakest of the three. Thinking about our pre-dental student, if she decided to pursue a career in dentistry because she was trying to please her parents or wanted a career that would end up making her a good amount of money, she may not have enough motivation to ultimately reach her goal. If she only had an extrinsic reason for becoming a dentist, it would be hard for her to stay motivated over time. So if you find yourself engaging in a task where the largest value you have is extrinsic value, it would benefit your motivation to seek out an intrinsic value or attainment value for engaging in the task. This will ultimately increase your motivation and hopefully help you pursue the goal over time. Next, we will explore goals, why they are important to our self-regulation, and how we can set goals that are effective. What does research say about goals? Research has shown that our actual performance will strive to meet the goal that we set. We may not complete the goal, but let's look at the alternative. In the absence of a goal, there is simply nothing there to motivate us to do better. We have no reference point to strive for, and it's almost as if our performance flatlines or can even decrease over time. But how and why do goals work? In educational psychology, we look at factors that we can measure, such as effort, duration or persistence, direction of attention, strategic planning, and reference point. When we have a goal to focus on, it tells us where our attention should be directed. And when we know where we're going, we often create a strategic plan to get there efficiently. Research has shown that when we have goals, we tend to put out more effort and we persist longer when we are faced with obstacles. We also have a reference point, so we know where we are in relation to our goal at any given time. This allows us to adjust our strategic plan or to evaluate the amount of effort we need to give in order to reach our goal. For example, if you had a paper due in a week and you set a goal to create the title page, the bibliography, and to write the introduction, you would be much more likely to get more done than if you just said, I'm going to work on my paper for an hour. You could create a strategic plan and put those three tasks in priority. You would always know at any given point while you were working how far away you were from being done. Your working memory would have a direction to focus on. You would know that you wouldn't need to worry about the body of the paper or wrapping it up at this point, but that you were just trying to get a head start, and that you could think about the content of your paper more globally so that you can write an introduction as opposed to focusing on the details of the paper. chances are you would persist through any obstacles or distractions and put more effort into completing your goal because you could see the end point. So now that we know how and why goals work, let's figure out how we can write some effective goals. We know from previous lectures that it's much more adaptive to focus on our goal than it is to avoid being a failure. Whether we're working on a task or we're writing out our goals, we want to make sure that we are always approaching success, keeping our eyes on the prize, and making sure that our attention is focused in the direction that we're moving. Because of this, we want to make sure that we don't write negative goals. So instead of writing, "I don't want to fail any of my tests," we want to frame this in the positive, such as, "I want to pass all of my exams this semester." Here are two other examples as well. While more traditional psychologists don't like to talk about the subconscious mind because it cannot be measured or quantified, there are 2 points we need to understand when it comes to our subconscious mind and goals. The first is when we have a goal, our subconscious mind almost works like a heat-seeking missile, always trying to find opportunities to achieve our goal, even when we're not thinking about it at a conscious level. The second is that our subconscious mind does not understand the word don't. So when we tell ourselves, "Don't fail the test," our mind hears, "fail the test." If you tell yourself, "Don't eat chocolate," our mind hears, "Eat chocolate." Our brain also works best in pictures, which is why visualization can also be very powerful. But before we visualize our goals, let's make sure that we're writing goals that are as effective as they can be. Along with having goals that are stated in the positive, the most effective goals are SMART, meaning they are specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely. Specific goals are written in as much detail as possible. Our subconscious mind needs to have a very clear representation of our goal. It is almost like visualization, which again is extremely powerful in programming our minds. Also, the more specific our goals, the easier it is for us to determine the best way to get there. Along with being specific, goals also need to be measurable. We need to know exactly where our goal is, whether or not we've made our goal, whether we've just missed it, or if we've passed it up. Remember that our goals are reference points. We should always know where we are in relationship to our goal. Our goals should also be action-oriented. Remember what we said about intention when speaking about motivation. In order for us to be motivated to pursue a goal, we need to have active choice. We need to actively engage in behavior in pursuit of our goal. Goals also need to be realistic. We need to believe in our goal at a conscious level, otherwise our subconscious mind won't believe it and it will not work in pursuit of the goal. This portion of writing a SMART goal is very idiosyncratic. What may be realistic for you may not be realistic for others, and what may be realistic for you today may possibly not have been realistic for you last week, or may not be realistic for you next week. This portion of writing effective goals should not be underestimated. You need to believe in your success in attaining the goal 100%. Otherwise, your mind will not work at 100% to help you get there. Lastly, our goals need to be timely. This not only allows us to fight procrastination, but it also gives us a deadline, a point in time when we need to stop, look around, and see if we made it. Did we reach our goal? Did we almost get there, or did we overshoot it? Let's reevaluate. What is our next goal going to be? Do we need to raise the bar on ourselves, or do we need to come up with a better strategy? So let's take a look at some goals next and see if we can spot whether or not they're SMART. Take a moment to read these 3 goals. Are they SMART? Are they specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely? While all 3 of these sentences are goals, there are words within them that make them less than effective, and there are certain aspects that are missing. Let's take a look at the first one. I want to try to learn how to study better. What words within this goal make it less than effective. If you guessed to try and better, then you are correct. Although this sounds like a goal, the words to try make it seem as though the person writing this goal is less than committed. But let's take a closer look at the word better. What exactly does better mean? How would you know if you learn to study better? How much better do you want to learn to study? Does this mean you want to use the same strategy and just use it at an earlier time and study more overtime instead of cramming? Does this mean that you want to use different strategies or possibly create a study group? There's no real way to measure whether or not this goal was achieved because it's not specific enough. So let's take one of these less than effective goals and make it smart. Take a minute to pause your video and see if you can change this into a SMART goal. I want to get good grades by studying harder. You've probably guessed that the words good and harder are not conducive to an effective goal. In order to make this a SMART goal, we need to make a goal that is more specific and measurable. What exactly do we mean by good? For each individual person, good is going to mean something different. And again, good grades in one class can be very different from good grades in another. Also, what do we mean by studying harder? Does this mean putting in longer hours or studying with a group? These are details that you're going to want to work out before you write your goal down and put it next to your nightstand or on your wall. We want our minds, both conscious and subconscious, to have a very specific point in which we're working toward. So here is one version of turning this goal into a SMART goal. I want to obtain a 3.5 GPA this semester by setting aside 2 hours per day to study in a quiet environment. You can see that this goal is specific, is measurable, is action-oriented, realistic, and timely. Here's a color-coded version of this goal so that you can see that all of the aspects of a SMART goal are present. First of all, it is specific and measurable. We have a specific GPA here of 3.5, and GPA itself is measurable. We have action steps in place. This imaginary student says that he wants to set aside 2 hours a day to study in a quiet environment, so that he's not only prioritizing studying, but also regulating his environment. In the green, you see that there is a deadline for this goal, that the end point of this goal is at the end of the semester. This is a time when our imaginary student will stop and evaluate his outcome. Did he reach his goal? Did his plan work? Does he need to adjust his strategies? This part of the process will allow him to reflect on his previous goal in order to better plan for his next goal. Lastly, the realistic part of this goal is not able to be verbalized. Again, this portion of a SMART goal cannot be underestimated. Its importance is very high, but this is the part of the SMART goal that needs to be evaluated not only from person to person, but also from context to context. Next, we will look at how we take our long-term goals and turn them into action plans. We've seen this productivity pyramid before. All of our goals should be derived from our values. Our values are the why of our behavior, the reasons why we do the things we do. Our long-range goals are the what. What would you like to accomplish in the future? What career do you want to pursue? But the important part for self-regulation especially is the how. The intermediate goals or the daily tasks are the action plan. These are how we are going to accomplish the long-range goals that we see in our future. How we're going to start our own business, how we're going to get into graduate school, how we're going to become a scientist, how we're going to write the next best screenplay. In order to be self-regulated learners, our daily tasks, our weekly tasks, and the things that we do on a semesterly basis need to be moving in the direction of our long-term goals. So what does this look like? Let's look at some examples of the 3 levels of goals, starting from the broadest, the long-term goals. Long-term goals take a year or years to accomplish. Oftentimes our long-term goals are goals in the future from 1 to 5 years away. These goals are very broad. There is a lot of planning and multiple intermediate and short-term goals that need to go into accomplishing a long-term goal. Some of your long-term goals may be what you would like to do after graduation, whether it's going to graduate school, obtaining your dream job, starting your own business, moving across the country or to the other side of the world. But regardless, these goals often take a lot of planning and many other separate goals to achieve them. An example of a long-term goal is, by fall 2017, I want to get accepted into the USC Cinematic Arts Master's Program by earning an overall GPA of 3.5. Intermediate goals take weeks or months to accomplish. This may be a semesterly goal that you have, or a goal to accomplish at the end of the month. An example of this type of goal is, by the end of this semester, I want to earn a 3.35 GPA in all of my classes by creating representations to help me learn new information. And lastly, we have short-term goals. These are also called performance goals or daily tasks. Daily tasks are done on an hourly or daily basis. They are very specific and can often be the step-by-step process to how we achieve our intermediate and long-term goals. An example of this very specific type of goal is, by the end of this week, I will create 2 or more effective matrices for Chapter 6 in CTWR 206A by comparing and contrasting the information I study. As you can probably see, these goals are not separate, and they in fact are all aligned. The short-term goal of engaging in more effective learning strategies will ultimately help the student obtain their intermediate goal of earning a 3.35 GPA. This is a step in the right direction for obtaining their overall goal of a GPA of 3.5 by fall 2017. As self-regulated learners, it is not only important that our long-term goals are derived from our values, but that our short-term goals and intermediate goals are aligned with and supporting our long-term goals. Again, our intermediate and short-term goals are the how we are going to get there step by step, how we are going to accomplish our long-term goals. Without these specific daily tasks and weekly or monthly goals, our long-term goals would remain only aspirations. Lastly, in writing effective goals, we need to be sure that they are not only specific, measurable, action-oriented, and realistic, but that they are timely. At this deadline that we set for ourselves, we need to stop and look at the outcome that we've achieved. Have we hit our mark? Did we overshoot our mark? Did we almost make it? Do we need to reevaluate our strategies, raise the bar on ourselves, or work a little harder? Taking the time to evaluate our results or outcomes is an extremely important process in becoming self-regulated learners. Finally, as you are learning this week, reflect on these questions. Which state of identity formation are you in when it comes to your career choice? Have you explored more than one possible career choice before making a commitment? What do you value? Are your academic and professional goals aligned with these values? Which type of value do you have for your academic and professional choices? And lastly, do you have short-term and intermediate goals? Are they SMART?